Imagine a road that no longer exists on any map. A white desert. A silence so deep that you can hear only your own breath. And within that silence, a faint, flickering light. A caravan. An ice caravan. You move closer. One more step, and suddenly you realize these wagons are not just transport. They are nighttime homes in the coldest place on Earth. What did a person feel when they lay down to sleep there for the first time, under the open Arctic sky, while the caravan walls cracked in the wind and the temperature outside dropped so low that the word cold stopped meaning anything at all? How do you close your eyes knowing that between you and endless winter there are only thin wooden boards, a little fur, and the hope that the night will pass calmly? How was it even possible to fall asleep on the move when the road itself was an icy desert and the caravan crawled across it slowly, creaking as if complaining about every breath of the wind? Today, you will hear a story not about heroes and not about great feats, but about people. About those who slept not in houses, not in warmth, but while moving through the heart of the Arctic, in ice caravans that were transport, shelter, and the only chance to survive the night. We'll break down how they kept their hands warm when fire was almost impossible, and warmth had to be found in things that would seem insane today. How they shared heat when every spark mattered. And why there was an unspoken rule in the caravan: whoever woke up first saved the others from the cold. How they survived nights when the wind howled so hard it felt like the caravan could be ripped off the ground. What they did when snow clogged every crack and turned the walls into solid ice. What rituals existed before sleep? Why they always stayed silent in the final minutes before lying down? Why they knocked on the walls of the caravan? And why footsteps in the snow at night were considered a bad sign? What they carried with them for the night? Why the most valuable pillow in the world could be made of ice? Why sleeping in an ice caravan was a trial not everyone survived? And why those who did survive came back changed? Get comfortable. The journey will be long, the night will be cold, but the stories you're about to hear will warm you better than fire. Imagine a road that exists only in winter, not in summer, not in autumn, only when rivers turn solid like glass and the ground freezes so deeply it feels less like earth and more like stone. That was the road of the ice caravans. No trails, no roads, no signs, just a white plain, crossed for weeks by long chains of sleds. Quiet. Endless, like stretched shadows of people moving through the cold. At first, you hear only the wind, then the steady creak of sled runners, and only after that, human voices, muffled by fur, as if winter itself didn't want to let them escape. These caravans did not set out for adventure. This wasn't travel, it was necessity. Someone had to deliver salt to a remote village. Someone had to carry out furs. Someone had to bring letters that had been waiting for months. And someone was simply going home, to a place where family waited and prayed that he wouldn't vanish into the white emptiness. Everyone walked in the caravan. Men who knew the road by heart, women who couldn't leave their children behind, boys seeing such vast distances for the first time, and old men walking beside the sleds, gripping their edges so they wouldn't fall behind. And every step was a choice, to keep moving or to freeze. To stop meant to stay there forever. The sleds were loaded so heavily that they creaked under the weight. Ropes froze into solid rods of ice. The fur on the seats crackled when people bent it beneath their bodies. Every breath turned into white vapor that instantly froze to collars and hoods. Sometimes the path ran straight across a river, ice underfoot, water beneath the ice. A man walking beside the sled listened to the dull echo of cracks somewhere deep below him. Farther on, the wind carried the faint smell of pine, warmth that lasted only a second. Then again, nothing but white emptiness. They slept right on the road, no choosing a place. Where darkness fell, they stopped. People gathered closer to one another. Horses lowered their heads, and the snow around them grew heavier, as if it wanted to cover the caravan and keep it until morning. Time moved differently here. A day became a long white strip. Daytime meant waiting for warmth. Night meant a test. Someone pushed their hands deeper into their sleeves. Someone massaged frozen fingers. Someone raised a collar to shield a cheek from the wind. Some counted their steps as if that could bring home closer. Others stared ahead in silence, too tired to think. These caravans had their own silence, thick, dense, like night itself. A silence where a person listened not to the world, but to themselves. And yet the most astonishing thing wasn't the road, or the cold, or the distance. It was that these people didn't just walk, they slept on the move. In the frost, in motion, on sleds thin as ice, under a sky black as coal, with wind beating their faces and snow crunching beneath their bodies, they fell asleep, as if this were normal. From the distance of centuries, it seems impossible. But this is where the strangest part of their journey begins. How people found sleep where even the air was against them. And this is the night we are about to enter. By evening, the caravan slowed. Not because the people were tired, but because the road itself changed. By day, the snow felt soft and yielding. By night, it became hard and ringing, like glass. The icy wind that only nipped cheeks during the day now cut skin like a knife. People fell silent. Every extra word became a cloud of vapor, instantly freezing to collars, fur hats, eyebrows. The travelers knew, to survive the night, you had to stop in time. The first night was always the most frightening. It revealed whether a person could endure the road. And when the caravan veered slightly away from the beaten path, everyone understood. This is where the trial begins. First, they searched for a place, not just anywhere to lie down. In an ice caravan, the choice of a sleeping place was a decision that could mean life or death. They needed to find a snowdrift that could block the wind, but not too high so it wouldn't collapse. They had to read the direction of the gusts. The elders always raised a bare hand and watched how the frost bit into the skin. A light southern wind meant a chance for a calm night. A northern wind meant a promise of a hard one. When the place was chosen, people slowly began unharnessing the animals. Horses shifted their weight, stamping in place. Dogs released clouds of steam from their nostrils and started digging the snow with their paws, making small hollows. In those pits, they would survive part of the night. Everything happened slowly, as if every movement carried weight and meaning. The traveler took out the hides. The bottom one was thick and rough, a shield between the body and the frozen ground. The top one was softer, but just as icy to the touch. He laid them out carefully, as if preparing not a bed, but a place to sit by a hearth for hours. In the tundra, there are no unnecessary movements. Every extra motion burns precious heat. When a person sits down on the hide, the snow beneath crackles softly. This sound is one of the most recognizable in the caravan. It means the ground accepts you. You lower yourself slowly, move too fast, and the cold hits like a sharp wave, through the back, hips, shoulders. He lies on his side, then carefully pulls the upper hide over himself. The air beneath it warms for a brief moment, and then freezes again. Only a narrow gap near the lips remains for breathing. Each warm exhale turns into silvery mist that settles onto the fur, which soon becomes stiff, almost like stone. Around them, only rare sounds. Someone adjusts straps. Someone coughs softly. A distant horse's snort echoes through the dark. Even the wind seems cautious. It touches the snowdrifts, sifts the snow, searches for gaps between bodies. But for now, it finds no way in. The first night feels the same for everyone. The back goes numb, not from cold, but from stillness. Fingers slowly lose feeling, and people hide them deeper under coats, pulling knees tight. Every minute, it feels as if the cold moves like a living creature, circling the body, searching for weak spots. And then comes the hardest part, the silence of thoughts. The body is covered, but the head remains exposed. And thinking on the first night is more dangerous than freezing. What if I don't wake up? What if the wind shifts and buries us in snow? What if the sounds in the dark aren't animals, but cracking ice? But soon, a shared feeling spreads through the caravan. The night is long, but it moves just like we do. Slowly. carefully, but it moves. After about an hour, breathing becomes steadier. The cold stops feeling like an enemy. It turns into background. It's a strange sensation. The body is still frozen, but the mind is calm. The snow beneath your side almost feels soft. A nearby horse shifts, and the movement feels like a warm wave. Even the sounds find a rhythm. The faint crackle of snow, the soft breathing of dogs, the quiet whistle of wind. Everything weaves into a single, lulling fabric. Sometimes someone quietly lifts their head to check the animals. Sometimes someone carefully turns to the other side, slow and deliberate, careful not to release stored warmth. No one speaks. In the caravan, people talk during the day. At night, they listen. And at some point, sleep arrives on its own. Not soft, not warm, not comforting. It is heavy, deep, as if the person sinks into the snow beneath them. This sleep does not soothe, but it gives strength. It is a temporary agreement between a human and the elements. You will survive this night, but tomorrow the cold will return. Morning always comes suddenly. A faint crackle when a person tries to move, and everything around shatters like a thin shell of ice. The frost has grown even stronger, but if a person wakes up, it means they have passed the first night. And the first night in an ice caravan is always an exam. It is the moment that shows whether a person walks this road not because they must, but because they can. After several days on the move, sleep stops being a trial. It becomes part of the journey, as constant as the horse's steps and the creak of the runners. People knew night is not a pause. It is a continuation of the road, only in a different silence. Everyone had their own way of preparing for this nightly journey. Long winter caravans always ended the day the same way, slowly, almost lazily. Animals gradually slowed their pace. The snow beneath hooves grew softer, and surprisingly, people did not rush to the fire. Everyone knew, first, you must create a place to sleep. A small personal space in the middle of endless white. Those in the lead group always settled first. They chose a patch of snow that was dense, packed tight by the wind, not loose. Loose snow stole heat too quickly. Then the quiet work began, real architecture of sleep. No one explained what they were doing. They simply moved calmly, from habit, without haste. Each person built around themselves something like a miniature house, without walls, without a roof. Everything was an extension of the body. The traveler laid out the hide not just as bedding, but as the bottom layer of a cocoon. It was always shaken before being placed on the snow, so night moisture would not turn into an icy shell. It settled like a dense carpet, smoothing the uneven ground. Some even smoothed the snow with their hands, as if preparing a bed. On top went the fur cloak. It was not a cloak in the usual sense. It was a universal night shelter. In the morning, it carried loads. During the day, it shielded from the wind. At night, it became the walls of a personal shelter. Experienced travelers knew how to fold it, so the fur formed 3 layers along the back and 2 across the chest. Then came the most important technique, wrapping. This was nothing like pulling a blanket over yourself. No, it was a precise, carefully learned ritual. The lower edge was tucked beneath the heels and calves. The sides were folded under the ribs. The top became a lid, one that could be opened in a single motion and closed again without a sound. Around the neck, the space was tightened with an extra fold to keep warmth from escaping. Every adult caravan traveler knew this from childhood. Every child learned it before learning how to read. Then came the sleeping posture. It was not chaos. It was not suffering. They knew how to lie down in the cold. Not on the back loses heat. Not fully on the stomach, breathing becomes heavy. Almost always on the side, but not just on the side. The face was covered with the palms, leaving a tiny gap between the fingers for breathing. The fur edge rested gently against the hands. This created a small chamber of warm air. Amazingly, it worked better than any mask, better than any scarf. Ice did not form on the face. Breath did not freeze directly onto the fur. Then began the work with sleeping neighbors. No one slept alone if it was possible to sleep together. Warmth was the only currency that could not be stored, only shared. Two people lay with their backs pressed together. This was called the warm wall. Heat transferred evenly, slowly, steadily, almost like from a stove. If three slept together, they formed a triangle. The one who was coldest lay in the center. An extra piece of fur was tucked beneath them, and their warmth became shared. No one said, "Lie here." It was so natural that words were unnecessary. A slight tilt of the head was enough for the others to understand. But the most remarkable part was not the fur or the posture. It was the small details of nighttime preparation passed from elders to children. Before sleep, you must not stare at the fire for too long. Your eyes will fail to adjust to darkness, and you may miss the morning fog. You must not place your hand on the snow. It numbs too quickly, and the entire cocoon loses heat. You must not speak after the fur is wrapped. Warm air escapes through the edges. You must not leave your face uncovered. Your breath will freeze on your eyebrows. Travelers followed these rules not out of fear, but because they knew. Sleep was part of the journey. Without rest, you could not survive the next day. By night, a special silence grew around the people. It was no longer the anxious silence of the first night. It was a silence that knew it could be trusted. Snow absorbed all sound. Only rarely could you hear a horse's heavy breathing, someone slowly turning to the other side, the soft rustle of fur against snow, a quiet sigh as someone found a new pocket of warmth. An hour after everyone lay down, the caravan looked as if the snow itself had grown over the people. The fur shimmered with silver. Frost traced delicate patterns along the edges of the cloaks. The traveler's breath rose in small clouds and vanished instantly, as if dissolving into the night. But the most important thing was happening inside, where warmth was preserved beneath the fur, where people slept, knowing a long road still lay ahead, where the night was no longer an enemy, but part of the journey, just as important as the steps taken by day. And while snow whispered under the light wind and the stars hung low above, people slept, curled into their carefully built cocoons, knowing one thing: morning would come, and that meant the night had been lived correctly. To understand how travelers kept warm, you have to forget everything we know about comfort. In an ice caravan, warmth was never a given. Warmth was a goal, a small victory earned through every movement of the body. They began long before lying down to sleep, right after sunset, when the last sound of runners dissolved into the white silence. Men and women slowly, almost ritualistically, prepared their defense against the night. Not clothing, armor. First came the ground, or rather, the snow that had to become ground. It wasn't enough to lay it down. It had to be tamed. Travelers packed it down with their heels, their palms, sometimes even their knees. The snow became dense, like an old carpet, and only then stopped pulling heat from the spine. On top of this base, they laid the hides, heavy, rough, smelling of smoke, sun, and home. The hides did not warm by themselves. They blocked the cold, keeping it from reaching the body. Sometimes travelers slid dry, brittle branches beneath the hides, branches found during the day. They lifted the fur slightly above the snow, creating a thin layer of air. And that air worked better than any modern technology. Then came the work with clothing. Many believe northern clothing is all about fur, but those who traveled in caravans knew the truth. The most valuable thing was the air between layers. So they wore not 2 layers, not 3, sometimes up to 7. The first layer was thin and dry, the second rough and woolen, the third soft, slightly damp from the day's breath, the fourth padded with down, the fifth made of fur, the sixth protective, catching snow, the seventh almost nightly armor, a heavy cloak taken from the sled, its corners crusted with ice. But the most surprising thing was this: they avoided absolute warmth. Warmth was considered dangerous. Sweat was the enemy. If you started sweating, you could turn into an ice statue within minutes. That's why every layer of clothing was chosen not to overheat the body, but to maintain a steady, controlled temperature. To warm their hands, they didn't rub their palms together like we do today. They slid their fingers into their armpits for a few seconds, then pulled them back out. That's how their fathers did it. That's how their grandfathers did it. And that's how they did it themselves. This small gesture meant, I'm alive. I can feel. I control the cold. Some wore small pouches of wool under their clothing. Not soft wool, but coarse, almost prickly, slightly damp. When it touched the body, it swelled and became denser. It didn't create heat. It trapped the air that the body itself warmed. Special attention was given to the feet. Feet were life on the road. If your feet froze, it wasn't sleep or rest. It was a sentence. That's why travelers placed thin bundles of dry grass between layers of socks. The grass rustled, crumbled, scratched the skin, but each stalk created a tiny pocket of air, and the feet stayed alive even in the cruelest frost. And when the cold became truly merciless, they pulled sacks over their feet. Ordinary cloth sacks, rough, plain. It looked strange, almost ridiculous. But inside a sack, air behaved differently. It became a trap for the frost, stopping it at the ankles. An even stranger detail. Before sleep, men sometimes rubbed snow into the fur of their cloaks. The snow froze the outer layer, making the fur stand upright. That way it insulated better, creating a cloud around the body that the cold couldn't penetrate. Women had their own method. They sewed small felt inserts into their collars, pieces that covered the mouth and nose from direct airflow. This protected the lungs, preventing the frost from burning them with a sharp breath. The most experienced travelers had fur hoods that were silent inside. So silent that you could hear nothing but your own breathing. That hood became a private space, a small room in the middle of endless winter. And before lying down to sleep, everyone made one small movement. A movement not taught in schools. They warmed their chest with their hands, not to heat the body, but to calm the heart. A calm heart meant a calm night. And when the person finally lay down, they became like a cocoon, slow, warm, stubborn. They didn't fight the cold. They entered into an agreement with it. The same agreement made by generations before them. Air, fur, snow. 3 things that could keep a human alive. By evening, the cold changes its voice. During the day, it only bites at your fingers, pinches your nose, throws sharp snow into your face. But when the sun sinks behind the forest line, the cold becomes something else. Heavy, dense, almost alive. It feels as if it slides down through the air and settles over the caravan like a vast, invisible blanket. The temperature drops fast, so fast that people don't even name it out loud. The number becomes outdated before the word leaves their lips. Breath turns into a white cloud that doesn't have time to disappear. It freezes on eyelashes, forming a fragile web of ice. One blink, and the ice cracks with a soft, dry sound. Fingers stiffen slowly. At first, it's just a tingling sensation, as if someone is touching the skin with a cold metal feather. Then movements become slightly slower. A few moments later, you have to look at your hands just to be sure your fingers are still bending. And then something stranger happens. Time begins to fade. The skin is cold, and the brain loses the boundary between the hand and the air. Cheeks, lips, ears. Everything becomes covered with tiny cracks. Not wounds, microscopic fractures like dry earth splitting under the sun. The wind finds them instantly. It doesn't just blow, it cuts. It moves along the face like thin, invisible blades. And a person learns to turn their head the right way to avoid another sharp strike against the cheek. Snow underfoot begins to sound different. It doesn't crunch, it snaps, like a thin glass sphere made of ice. Each step rings dry and sharp, audible even through the howl of the wind. Caravan travelers say, this is how snow sounds only when the cold becomes dangerous. And in that moment, people understand something important. Night cold is not about temperature. It's about endurance, about character, about the ability not to surrender to the first wave of fear when you step out of your warm fur cocoon and feel the frost press its palm against the back of your head. Sometimes quiet panic spreads among the travelers. No shouting, no chaos. Just someone suddenly falls silent, looks around, and their eyes reveal that tension that only appears when a person realizes they have overestimated their strength. Once, a young man traveled with the caravan. Too young to know all the rules of the road, and too stubborn to listen to those who did. He walked on the windward side, constantly pulling off his mittens to adjust the straps on the sleds. By evening, his fingers had turned blue, and his nails looked strangely dull. When the caravan stopped for the night, he couldn't untie the knot on his fur. His hands wouldn't obey him. He sat down in the snow quietly, slowly, as if trying to catch his breath. But the breath only thickened in the air, froze, and settled on his collar. 3 people warmed him until his fingers began to feel pain again, that sharp, burning pain that means life is returning. The senior caravaner, a man who had walked these routes dozens of times, said a phrase that many would later repeat. "The snow is our enemy and our home. Forget the second, and the first will kill you." These words were not advice. They were a warning pressed out of people by the cold itself. Because the frost here could do one remarkable thing. It revealed who you truly were. It showed who lived inside the fur, a frightened child or a calm adult. It forced people to respect their own bodies, their weakness, their strength, their limits. The wind whistled louder, settling into a steady rhythm, precise, almost painfully exact. Sometimes it seemed to the travelers that the cold spoke to them, not with words, but with sounds. The creak of leather on the harness, the crack of freezing snowdrifts, the dull knock of wood, the broken breathing of an animal, and the silence, louder than all these sounds combined. In moments like these, most understood, the night ahead would be long, very long. But it was during these nights that caravanners became true travelers of winter. Not because they defeated the cold, but because they learned how to live beside it. When the road finally fell silent, when the snow stopped squeaking beneath the runners, and the caravan froze in its night position, what the travelers called the quietest time of the day began. Cold no longer mattered. Fatigue no longer mattered. Night in an ice caravan always arrived the same way, slowly, almost shyly, like a guest who does not want to disturb the hosts. The travelers knew, before lying down, the last words of the day had to be spoken. Not prayers, those would come later, but simple, everyday phrases that had become part of their road rituals. Everything is in place. Who takes the first watch? The horses have enough feed. The snow is firm. We won't fall through the crust at night. No restless talk, only quiet, short, necessary words. Every word is like an exhale. Every answer is confirmation that the caravan has lived through another day and made it to the night. Someone walks up to the animals, checks the straps and harnesses, runs a hand along the warm neck of a horse, feels the steam of its breath, listens to how it shifts its weight. Small, careful movements the road itself has taught. This silence must not be disturbed. Every sound in it is real. Every detail matters. Someone shakes snow from the edges of a fur. Someone adjusts the collar at the neck. Someone whispers something simple. Let the night be short. Or, let the wind pass us by. And then comes the moment you can never see during the day. The entire camp seems to take one deep breath, and then one long shared exhale. That is the sign. You can close your eyes. People lie down slowly, as if afraid to frighten the thin, fragile silence hanging over the snow. Someone turns onto their side. Someone presses the edge of the fur to their face. Someone places their hands on their chest, as if warming their heart. And a silence arrives in which you hear only your own breathing and the beating of your heart. First, quiet, steady, warm. Then deeper, a little slower, like the ticking of an old clock in a house left far behind. The travelers do not fall asleep immediately. The gentle sway of the wind, the soft whisper of snow at the edge of the camp, the rare steps of the watchman, all of this slowly dissolves anxiety, the way warm water melts ice. And so the night accepts them, not quickly, not harshly, but gently, as if covering them with a vast, soft blanket called silence. This is the true ritual of night in the ice caravans. When a person no longer thinks about the cold, doesn't remember the road, doesn't wait for morning, they simply let go again and again until sleep finds them on its own. When everything has finally gone still, when the traveler's eyes are closed and the caravan seems frozen inside a great white silence, the night reveals its other face. Not cruel, not predatory, but cautious, demanding respect. The first danger of the night is a sound that almost doesn't exist. In the frost, silence becomes dense. It presses against the ears, and inside it, any movement feels louder. A gust of wind snapping, the crunch of frost under an animal's paw, even the slow settling of snow from a branch. It's not frightening. The world simply becomes alert. Somewhere far away, beyond the line of sight, a long, drawn-out howl may stretch across the dark. Not nearby, not threatening, but as if the animal were speaking to the frost itself. The travelers were used to it. They knew a wolf rarely comes close to fire, and that a caravan is too large, too loud, too alive to be attacked lightly. Still, that distant sound was a reminder. The night is alive. The second danger was the blizzard. It never arrived suddenly. First, a slight trembling of the air, then tiny needles of snow, and only minutes later, the world begins to spin in white spirals. If a blizzard started at night, the greatest threat was not the cold and not the wind. It was the morning. The storm could erase the tracks. A caravaner could step outside and see nothing but a perfectly smooth white plain, not a single mark left behind. Then they had to remember the road by the stars, by the shape of snowdrifts, by the direction of the wind. The third danger was ice beneath the snow. In winter, roads often ran along frozen rivers. It was impossible to see where the ice was thick and where it was hollow, like a shell. Sometimes at night, a soft, dull sound could be heard, as if someone were tapping on glass from below. The travelers knew this was not fear. It was a warning. Thin ice never breaks suddenly. It sings first. The senior watchman would quietly step out and look for a bluish glow beneath the snow. If he found it, the caravan would carefully shift aside without waking the others. The fourth danger was stories, the ones told in whispers when the fire was already fading. There were caravans, the elders said, that went the wrong way. They did not die. They did not vanish. They simply did not return on time. And the whole village knew. If a caravan left on fresh snow and, after a week, no return tracks appeared, it meant it had found another route. No one knew why. Not a storm, not animals, not illness, nothing sinister. Just that sometimes the road chooses who it opens itself to, and who it does not. These stories did not create fear. They created quiet respect for the night. And the most interesting thing was this: the travelers were not afraid of the night. They knew danger was not there to frighten them, but to remind them to stay attentive. A caravan at night is not a journey through darkness. It is a journey inside a world that breathes differently, where every sound is a sign, every wind a message, every small detail a part of the road. And in that understanding lived a calm, steady wisdom. The dangers of the night did not scream. They did not attack. They did not rush into the camp. They simply stood nearby, like silent guards, watching to make sure the travelers did not forget what kind of world they were walking through. Morning in an ice caravan never arrives suddenly. There is no familiar light breaking through a window, no roosters, no city noise, no warm sunbeam touching your face. Here, morning is not light. It is a state. It begins deep inside, in the body, in the breath, in the mind that slowly rises from the night cold, as if pushing through a layer of ice. Your eyes are still closed, but you already feel it. Something has changed. The darkness has softened. The air feels slightly lighter. The cold is no longer as predatory as it was a few hours ago. And only when the mind starts to recognize these first signals of morning, a sound appears nearby. Someone turns on their fur. Someone carefully, very carefully, moves a hand, searching for a mitten. Someone pulls the fur up to their shoulders, trying to hold on to the last fragments of warmth that the night has generously taken from the body. Breathing is still hard. Every breath is rough, icy, as if the air passed through a stone cave. The steam that escapes the mouth rises in a thick cloud and settles on the fur, turning into tiny white grains of frost. A person does not open their eyes immediately. They do it slowly, as if afraid to disturb the fragile calm of morning. At first, they see only one thing: fog. Real morning fog, born not from the air itself, but from the breath of dozens of people and animals trapped beneath the night sky. The fog is thick, milky. It softens the world, making everything quieter, as if the caravan is waking up inside a cloud. Then shapes begin to appear, flattened fur beneath the body, frozen in places. At the edge of the fur lies a thin crust of ice, formed overnight after hours of breathing the same cold air. A little farther, the outline of a neighbor who is already sitting up, but moving slowly, as if the back remembers the night cold and resists every bend. Somewhere to the left comes a heavy, wet snort, an animal. It stretches out its front leg, steps forward with the other, and the snow beneath the hoof releases that unmistakable morning crack. Dull, brittle, confident. A clear sign that the frost here is serious. Travelers always wake after the animals. This is an ancient order. Animals feel the shift of the horizon earlier than people do. They are the first to notice that the dark dome of night has grown slightly lighter, just a shade. And that sound, the hoof on snow, the snort, the slow, heavy breath, has always been the first proof for caravan travelers that the night is over. Someone slowly rises, first sitting up, leaning on one hand, then remaining still for a long time, listening to their own body, where it aches, where it froze, where it feels choose, almost choose, as dry snow crunches beneath them when they shift their weight. The crackle is quiet, but so distinctive that you can tell from it alone the night was harsh. Fingers inside the mittens barely respond at first. A person clenches them, unclenches them, and only after a few seconds feels a weak pain. Alive, warming, as if the body is saying, "I'm here, I made it." Someone rubs their face. Tiny grains of frost remain on the skin and fall onto the fur like silvery dust. And when a person touches their eyelashes, they chime softly, a delicate crunch like tiny glass needles. Gradually, sounds return, but all of them are soft. The quiet crackling of snow, a long, stretching yawn, the damp, heavy sound of leather as someone tightens a strap. There is not a single sharp noise. Morning in a caravan does not tolerate abruptness. By the fire, if it still smolders, lie embers that the night almost suffocated with snow and wind, but one or two are still alive. And when the wind touches them, they breathe out a red glow, like eyes that have just opened. The travelers begin to gather. Someone shakes the fur, and a thin cloud of snow lifts from it. Someone checks the knots they tied the night before, in the dark, tight knots, almost stone hard from the frost. Someone places a hand on the side of an animal, making sure it is warm. The animal answers with a heavy, moist breath. The animals stand calmly, even though they were cold too. Their fur along the neck is covered in frost, but inside they are warm. And people always felt a strange, deep comfort from that warmth. If the animals survive the night, then you will survive too. The person stands up. Snow beneath the boots answers louder than it should, as if it has also woken up and is slightly surprised by the steps. And then comes the moment every traveler remembers from their very first journey, the moment of gratitude. No one ever says it out loud, but every morning in the caravan has its own quiet ritual, an unspoken thank you that the night did not take anyone. Because nights here are enemies, strong, honest, alien like cold gods. And morning is an ally. Morning is proof that the caravan is still alive, that the journey continues, that the road did not win. Someone tightens the straps, someone adjusts a hood, someone lingers with their eyes on the tracks around the camp. They look like a frozen map of the night, a map that holds every hour that was survived. Only after that does the caravan take its first step, very quietly, very slowly, as if the new morning is a sacred gift that must not be scared away by haste. And inside every person, one thought sounds, simple but powerful. If you survive this night, you defeated the cold. There is one secret of the ice caravans that is almost never written about and rarely remembered by descendants. Not things, not furs, not shelters, but language. A quiet, special language understood only by those who have walked a long road across Winterland at least once. It is not words in the usual sense. It is a way of breathing, of moving, of living side by side. When frost tightens the air and night makes voices too loud, a traveler would wake in the morning and never ask aloud, "Are you alive? Are you okay?" That would sound too sharp, like a blow against silence. Instead, he would slightly lift his chin, barely noticeable, as if checking the wind. And the neighbor would understand. "You're here?" "I'm here." The answer was even quieter. A soft exhale, a brief nod. Sometimes just a light tap of a mitten against the edge of the fur. Everything is fine. The night was endured. By day, the caravan moved almost in silence. But silence did not mean emptiness. It was filled with dozens of signs that looked random to outsiders, but inside the caravan became full sentences. If a traveler slightly raised his hand and lowered it, it meant stop, check the snow. If he tapped the wooden handle of his staff twice, it meant the ice is thinner than it looks. If someone turned their head not toward the road, but slightly upward toward the horizon, it meant the snow has grown heavier, move slower. Every movement was deliberate, shaped not by culture, but by necessity. Frost is a bad friend to the voice. A word spoken loudly shattered the air, scattered like fragile glass dust, and carried heat away. So the caravans learned to speak with silence. There were other signals too, tiny ones, noticed only by their own. When someone placed a palm on an animal's chest, it was a sign of gratitude, not to people, but to the journey itself. When a traveler shook snow from the edge of his fur 3 times instead of 2, it meant a slope is ahead, stay close. When a caravan man lightly bit his lower lip and looked toward the shadow of snowdrifts, it meant tonight will be colder than yesterday. But perhaps the most touching language was the evening one. Closer to night, people grew so tired that words felt heavy. And then a quiet speech appeared, a language that could be called the language of fire. When someone added a small branch to the fire, it meant, come closer, I'll share the warmth. If someone placed the branch not directly into the fire, but slightly to the side, it meant, let those behind us warm themselves first. And when a traveler gently nudged the snow closer to the fire with his foot, just a couple of centimeters, it was an old caravan sign. We sleep here tonight. This spot is our home until morning. But the quietest, the most deeply human sign was almost invisible. At night, when the wind finally calmed and everyone settled into their furs, just before closing their eyes, people made a small movement, a barely noticeable tilt of the head toward the caravan, toward those lying nearby, toward those who shared the cold and the darkness with them. It was a sign of respect, a sign of presence, a sign that said, we are together. You are not alone in this cold. No traveler ever called all this a language, but anyone who had walked with a caravan even once could understand a person from a single glance, by the way they adjusted a sleeve, by how they placed a foot on the snow, even by how they breathed into the frozen silence. The caravan spoke not with voices, but with movement, breath, attention. And this language was quieter than the wind, but more reliable than any words. When the viewer listens to this part, the brain begins to hear this soft, invisible speech. It relaxes, sinks deeper, and feels itself inside that vast, wild, frozen journey, where communication is warmth passed between people, even in silence. In every ice caravan, there was one invisible center. Not the leader, not the cargo, not the road, but the fire. A tiny point of warmth that seemed almost absurd against the endless winter. And yet the travelers knew, as long as that spark was alive, they were alive too. Fire was not just fire. It was a friend, a teacher, a hope. They guarded it like breath, like the memory of home. When the caravan stopped for the night, people silently shaped a circle of snow so the wind would not steal the heat. Some built small snow walls. Others laid branches in a semicircle, not for burning, but so their shadows would slow the gusts of air. Lighting a flame at -30 was an art of its own. Dry branches were almost non-existent, so travelers collected tiny pieces of bark, trying to preserve the warmth of the tree itself. Even in winter, they carried them under their clothes, warming them with their own bodies. Sometimes all day long. And when a place for the fire was finally found, they did not light it, they revived it. The caravan keeper carefully poured out a fragile handful of dry bark, pressed it gently with his palms, like a newborn, and breathed lightly. Once, twice, a third time, and then a small orange spark took its first breath, so weak it could be extinguished by a single blink. But they knew, the first flame does not like haste. It must not be rushed. It must not be shaken. It must not be blown on in fear. Fire demanded respect, and they gave it. There was always one person standing nearby, responsible for the spark. In the caravans, they would say, "Tonight, I hold the fire." This was not boasting, it was responsibility. Because if the flame went out, everyone would freeze. That person sat closer than the others. His face was lit by warmth, but his hands remained cold. He did not sleep. He listened to the fire, its crackle, its breathing, its moods. If the flame grew too high, he tamed it with snow. If it grew too weak, he fed it air. They said that a good keeper of the spark could hear the fire change before the wind itself changed. Sometimes small stories appeared, moments that travelers would pass on for years. Once, a young man who had joined a caravan for the very first time stepped aside and returned with a small dry tree, the only one in the entire area that had not frozen solid. He found it almost by accident, almost by instinct, and when he placed it beside the fire, the elders nodded. It was his first real act, his first victory over the frost. There was another man as well, an old caravan traveler who had walked these winter roads for nearly 40 years. He always sat by the fire, as if speaking to it, and quietly repeated a phrase that later became a legend. "As long as there is fire, we are alive." He said it softly, without drama, without inspiration, simply with the certainty of someone who had seen many times how the disappearance of a single spark turns night into emptiness. The fire was light, but not bright, soft and warm, like the breath of someone's hand. It illuminated the firs, casting trembling shadows on the snow. And even the most exhausted travelers would stop for a moment just to look at it. Because in that flickering glow, there was a feeling of home. A home they had not seen for months. And there was something else. The fire knew how to calm. It spoke only as much as the night allowed. It crackled, it whispered, it touched cheeks with warmth, and travelers who had endured the hardest days would sit nearby and close their eyes. Not because they wanted to sleep, but because for the first time on the entire journey, they felt safe. In moments when the wind howled, when the cold turned the air into glass, when animals trembled and hands lost their warmth, the fire was the only thing that remained alive. It was the point around which all human fragility gathered, all hope, all stubbornness, all determination to keep moving forward. And when travelers woke in the morning, the first thing they did was not look at the road, not check the snow, not touch the harnesses. They looked at the embers, small red dots still glowing. If the embers were warm, it meant the night had been lived correctly. If not, it meant winter had taken its price. Fire was not just warmth. It was the boundary between survival and not making it. That is why it was guarded the way one guards a heart. And in the ice caravans, there was one thing impossible to forget. Not the cold, not the road, not the endless creak of the runners. but the sky. The very one the travelers called the endless sky. They rarely spoke about it out loud, but anyone who had ever stepped out of a warm shelter and lifted their eyes upward knew there is nothing like it anywhere else. Imagine this. The night has not fully gone yet, but the snow already begins to glow from within, as if a weak fire were hidden beneath it. The air is completely still. Take one step, and you hear a clean, quiet crunch. The travelers rise slowly, as if afraid that one careless movement might shatter this fragile transparency of silence. And in that moment, they look up. And there it is, a sky unlike ours. So deep it feels as if you could step into it. The stars do not simply shine. They burn, as if sending signals to everyone walking the winter road. No lanterns, no city light, nothing to steal their glow. Only a pure, delicate universe, visible only to those who live between snow and wind. Sometimes, a thin green beam would appear above the caravan, a faint reflection of the northern lights. It did not dance. It was not bright. It simply lay above the land, quietly, like the soft breath of cold itself. And the travelers would stop and look at it a little longer. Not because it was rare, but because in moments like these, even an adult understands. The world is far larger than the road beneath your feet. While checking the harnesses, brushing snow from the furs, they would sometimes exchange short phrases that only their own could understand. Tonight, the stars are close. The night is kind. The light walks with us. These words sounded almost like a prayer, but without raised voices. More like a confession of love to this harsh yet beautiful land. And the most surprising thing, they did not need to look for long. Just a few seconds of lifting the head, and something inside became calmer, as if that vast, cold sky embraced them better than any fur. In moments like these, even the hardest nights felt like part of something greater, something right. And every traveler knew. It was for moments like this that the snow, the frost, the silence were worth enduring. Because you can see a sky like this only here, where the road is long, where the cold is honest, and where a human being stands alone before the most beautiful light in the world. When the journey is long, you stop waiting for the end. You walk, you do your work, you listen to the snow crack beneath the runners, and then, suddenly, the caravan begins to slow. At first, no one understands why. Then someone notices. There's a fire ahead. A weak point of light, so small it seems imagined at first. But the closer the caravan moves, the more certain it becomes. It is the lights of a camp. One glow becomes two, then several, and finally an entire line of warm lights scattered along a small winter settlement. No one shouts, "We made it!" Such words are rare in a caravan. On the contrary, the closer they get, the quieter it becomes, as if everyone is afraid to disturb that rare, astonishing moment when the cold road finally comes to an end. When the caravan stops, the silence becomes thick. The sleds no longer creak, the wind no longer lashes the face, and everyone simply stands there, getting used to the thought that tonight will be warm. The animals are the first to move. They shake themselves, throwing off the snow, snort softly, catch the scent of smoke from the camp. People step down from the sleds more slowly. The body is tired after the long day, but inside putly a lightness that cannot be mistaken for anything else. Someone exhales as if they had been holding their breath all day. Someone smiles quietly. Someone sits right down in the snow just to feel stillness after endless motion. This is the most honest moment of the journey. No words are needed, no choices, no speed. Only an exhale, the warmth of distant lights, and the feeling, you made it. The travelers gather their things, check the straps, thank the animals. Snow crunches softly underfoot. Now the fire can be heard, not only seen. The quiet crackle of wood, distant voices, the smell of smoke. And as they approach the camp, everyone feels the same thing. The night has been survived. That means the road will continue. Arrival is not an ending. It is a quiet, we made it, a reward for the cold, the wind, and the road. The moment when the world becomes just a little warmer. When the road ends, a person always looks back, not to check the tracks, but to understand what the night has taught them. Ice caravans gave people a simple truth. We are always looking for warmth. Sometimes in fire, sometimes in another person, sometimes simply in the hope that morning will come on time. Anyone who has spent a night on the road knows cold is not only about frost, it is about a test, about how easy it is to get lost inside yourself and how hard it is to keep calm. But that is where the power of night lies. When everything around is dark and quiet, a person suddenly understands everything important is already with them. The warmth of hands, a steady breath, the thought that morning will put everything in its place. Our path always goes through cold, through hard days, long roads, meetings that pull us farther, and moments when we want to stop. Night is where patience is born, and every sleep is a small victory over what frightens us. The people of the caravans knew, if you survived the night, you became stronger, not loudly, not visibly, but truly. And maybe that is why their stories still feel alive. They remind us that any road can be walked by someone who knows how to warm themselves with even the smallest spark. Today, you did not just hear a story about a caravan. You walked a part of the road with them, from cold to warmth, from anxiety to calm. And if you want, tonight you can walk this road too. Close your eyes, take a slow breath, and the road will find you on its own.